my fellow Liberians in Radio Land. Today I have, as political leader of the MPC, taken the liberty to engage the people of Liberia and the media on the issue of the State of the Nation address delivered by President William last week. And I want to start this review by quoting what he has said in every portion and provide you with the clarity where there were misstatements. He says, as your president, I've made it my overreaching purpose and duty to work towards preserving the peace of this nation, ensuring always that we do not slide back into conflict. This has been the fundamental underpinning of all development and policy initiatives of my administration. The record will show that we have achieved undeniable success in this endeavor, while at the same time always ensuring that there is a strict adherence to the rule of law and protection for the constitutional rights of our citizens as we consolidate our democracy and develop our nation. Clearly, it doesn't appear to me, unquote, it doesn't appear to me much has been done by this administration to foster peace and reconciliation. There have been no more than 2 meetings in 6 years between opposition and the government. That doesn't speak well of a great relationship to foster peace between a government and the opposition. The government at other times have brutalized the opposition for exercising or speaking simple truth to power, and any of these instances could have led to a full-blown conflict. The non-resolution of unexplained deaths of persons has enabled fear in the minds of Liberians. Peace is a political dividend of satisfied citizens. It seems to me Liberia currently enjoys the silence of the guns. President Weah again speaks and says, I quote, perhaps most significant is that these elections are the first to be primarily organized and administered by Liberia since the drawdown of the United Nations peacekeeping mission in 2018. This is our moment, therefore, to continue to demonstrate to the world that we are a peace-loving nation and that we are capable and ready to undertake elections that include all Liberians in a free and credible process. In so doing, it is both important and imperative that we summon our collective will to vigorously confront potential troublemakers and anarchists by applying the full force of the law that is provided for such circumstances. We owe it to ourselves, to our children, and to our children's children to repel and eliminate any threat to our hard-won peace. The MPC applauds you, Mr. President, for this declaration. All potential troublemakers and anarchists must be resisted with the full weight of the law. But let it never be said that the greatest threat to peaceful general and presidential elections is you, Mr. President. Recently, a large catch of arms was discovered at the free port of Monrovia. While the circumstances seem quite blurry, the silence of the investigators about the catch of arms is even more terrifying. The fanfare that graced the discovery has suddenly waned. We in the opposition community are uneasy about the seized arms. Who are the importers? What were their intent? What is the quantity of arms? Could members of the opposition community be involved in the investigation for the purposes of transparency? Where is the current catch being stored? Our history is replete with false coups and lies on members of the opposition community. It is our hope that this catch of arms, graced with massive fanfare and sudden silence, will not be distributed to compatriots of the government capable of committing massive destruction that will be attributed to the opposition as a ploy to win elections, while we are suppressed and incarcerated. Let such never be associated with your administration. The peace we have enjoyed is hard-won, and let no deranged personal aspiration or the untamed ambitions of men consumed by power be permitted to influence the outcome of these elections through unconstitutional methods. To this end, we urge a quick closure of the investigation with the help of the religious and opposition community. The president goes further to say, and I quote, "Let me also congratulate you for the enactment into law of the Kamara Abdullah Kamara Act of Press Freedom, which is a very historic piece of legislation that codifies and decriminalizes free speech, as enshrined in our 1986 Constitution. With the passage of this new law, we have cast into the dustbin of history all outdated criminal statutes that once restricted freedom of speech. Today, we are proud to see that dozens of newspapers exist, unhampered and unrestricted, along with the numerous radio and TV stations that are now flooding our airwaves. Mr. President, the greatest threat to freedom of expression is not the absence of legislation or the passage of it, but its implementation. 6 years later, your government has been the largest obstacle to the implementation of laws like the Freedom of Information Act and the now passed Kamara Act by your refusal. Unsealed your asset declaration. That is the greatest contribution to enforcing these laws. Publicly encourage others in your government to do so. Punish people in your government who refuse to do so. Your failure to punish others who willfully and openly violate the rights of others is also in support of these kinds of violations. Your failure to check impunity is also affecting the implementation of these laws. So while these laws are very good, actions must be taken to show that they can be implemented or the implementation is supported. I quote again, when I took the oath of office in January of 2018, the Liberian economy was in a state of major distress. The macroeconomic foundations were weak. The country's net international reserve, which had been used by the previous government to stabilize the exchange rate, was very low. The exchange rate had plunged into free fall, and the then government did not seem to have the tools to deal effectively with stabilizing the currency at that time. As a consequence, inflation was increased at an alarming rate, while domestic revenue and development assistance were in decline. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, my fellow Liberians, I'm a known critic of the previous administration for their level of wastefulness and poor economic policy, but clearly the declarations above are untrue, and I encourage you, Mr. President, to hold a press conference apologizing to the people of Liberia. Here are the facts below. The Central Bank of Liberia report of 2017 clearly shows, and I quote, page 5, gross foreign reserves position, excluding SDR holdings of the Central Bank, at the end of November 2017 grew by 8.3% to $222.8 million from US $205.8 million reported during the previous month. due mainly to a 28.2% expansion in CBR balances with banks abroad. Also, the IMF in 2017 report says Liberia's foreign reserve was 585,997,777. Listeners in Radio Land might want to know what's responsible for the disparity. There is something called SDR, Special Drawing Rights, which is created by the IMF for each country around the world. Like you see recently, a $350 million was allocated to Liberia, which is $248 million in special drawing rights. So the special drawing rights is a currency structure at the IMF. So the IMF included that. What the central bank said was excluding the special drawing rights. So had the central bank in its report included that, it would have been this in $585.9 million US. So as of 2017 December, when the new government came to power in January, the balances as of our special drawing rights and our reserves was actually $585.9 million. If you exclude special drawing rights, it was actually $222.8 million. The successes or non-successes of your administration after 6 years can still be discussed without trying to malign or defame one's predecessor. That politics of the blame game must be a thing of the past. In fact, the records show that Liberia's foreign reserve declined in 2019 to $297 million, according to the IMF report, also according to the central bank report, but rose in 2020 to $340 million. So if anybody caused a decline on Liberia's foreign reserve, it was the Weah administration. Liberia's total reserve, domestic and foreign, again, was drastically reduced by the Weah administration. But let's go to something else. The IMF and Liberia Central Bank post inflation in 2017 to 12.4%. That's 2017. It jumped in 2018 to 23.6% by about 12%. We all know who was in power in 2018. It was not the previous administration. So I'm very startled that a president mounts the podium in front of the legislature and spew out stories and total lies. This, in our mind, is totally unhelpful. And if the president is beginning to develop credibility problem, it's all the justification why we should retire him. Don't forget, the people of Liberia voted George Weah not because he was eloquent. He himself said it. Not because he was some of the best and you know, not because he was one of the intellectuals of Liberia. They voted him because they trusted him to be there on the table to seek their interests. But in 6 years, we really cannot see much, and the lies are beginning to show. Deep into your administration, clearly, there were deep missteps and false starts. Honor your administration, acknowledge that, and stop the blame game. I quote again from his speech. He said, in 2019, we also set out to fix the broken and unfair wage system in which government workers were paid without any set of rules or pay grades. To end this unfairness, we have to abolish a general allowance system that was allowing this to happen. Although we were faced with revenue challenges, we were determined to keep all civil servants on the payroll. And so we adjusted the wage system and gave every, while some 7,000 were adjusted down. Again, this is untrue. The records also disagree with you. The total wage bill by 2015 was $246.7 million, according to the 2015 2016 national budget, which also concluded at this same amount with the 2017 budget. So I don't know where the president getting his numbers from. The total workforce in 2017 was 55,000. The current wage bill as of the 2022 budget is 296 million. The current workforce is 70,000 people employed in government, an increase of 15,000. So all of these adjustments of special and general allowance, even at that, the wage bill is still higher than the previous wage bill. And apparently all of this was done to accommodate 15,000 CDC partisans that needed to get government job anyway. That's why we moved from 55,000 to 70,000 workforce. Revenue collections for President Weah again says revenue collection for 2022, including grants, was $740 million compared to $646 million in 2021. A large part of this difference is attributed to an increase in domestic revenue mobilization for the calendar year 2022. This revenue performance was driven by higher receipts of tax and non-tax revenue, especially taxes on international trade and taxes on income and profits. Of this amount, domestic taxes was $605 million and external resources received from our development partners was $135 million. Again, it is difficult to vet these claims in the absence of a budget performance report, which has never been submitted in the last 6 years. What really is a budget? A budget is an estimate. You can say, look, I'm going to collect $10,000 or I'm going to collect $20,000. In the end, when you submit a budget performance report, it gives a clear picture of what you've actually collected and what you've actually spent. So all of this that has been said, we have no real basis to gauge that because we don't have one. We encourage the government to avail a budget performance report so that that is the basis for people like us that understand these issues to provide clarity to our people. Again, expansion of tax base. The Liberian tax base have not been expanded. How do you expand tax base? If you have a business, how do you expand the income of the business? Either through more customers or through expanding the size of your shop to sell more goods, or through expanding the shop by maybe opening a branch. In the case of Liberia, how many new businesses were opened? Did the president report that? He followed his speech. I've consumed his entire speech. No new businesses were opened. The World Bank is clear. The increase in, the Liberia's growth of 5% is clearly based on two factors. Is after COVID 2020, what happened? There was an increase in the price of rubber, increase in the price of iron ore, and other exports that we had. Liberia as a country, we have not been able to expand our tax base. The expansion of the tax base would have led to maybe now we're adding value to rubber in many respects, in many instances, maybe in many instances we're adding value to local raw material, something that the MPC is strong on. So our tax base have not been expanded. This is why for the last 6 years, employment was never spoken about, but we're going to deal with that further in our discourse. The fight against corruption. The president commended the passage of the LACC law and also commended the Witness Protection Program. As I've been said earlier, Liberia has lots of laws. It is the implementation and political will that is the problem. In fact, I remember when former President Doe came to power, he passed a law to move the capital of Monrovia to Banga. But What president, though they didn't know, the same legislature have passed that law on a former President Barclay to move the capital. The same legislature under Madam Selly were all repealing those two laws, passed another law to move the capital to Zikipa. So if even you want to pass law and say, look, anybody call me George, we are not doctor, we are making a crime, yeah, you know, the legislature will pass it. That's all they do, they just pass laws. You know, if you ask them to even pass whatever they're ready to pass it. So passage of law doesn't impress us. What impresses us the most under the circumstance? Let's look at the fight against corruption. A foreign government accused several of your chief lieutenants and accused them of corruption. Sanction them. Your response? You dismiss them. By dismissing them, you acknowledge that there may be some issues. What have you done? You've not investigated them. You've never asked the GAC or the LACC to even investigate them. The laws of Liberia are clear. We need to at least have them investigate them. Not just that, a person working in government, let's even assume his salary is $5,000 US. Overnight, he's got 5 houses. And these people are closest to you. What have you done to ask the simplest of questions to investigate them? But of course, you come to the podium, another 6 years is at stake, and you say, you passed a law, and as a result now, we should begin to celebrate and justify that something's being done to fight corruption. Clearly, your administration lacked the capacity to fight corruption because it appears to me that Liberia is now a state sponsor of corruption. Let's look at the educational sector. According to the World Bank, Liberia spent 2.7% of its GDP in 2021 on education. The total expenditure on education as a percentage of the total government spending is 6.9%. But let's compare us to Sierra Leone, right next door. The total expenditure on education in Sierra Leone as a percentage of GDP is 9.1%. We go further. In Sierra Leone, comparatively, the total expenditure on education as a percentage of total government spending is 33.8%. So you mustn't be surprised why educational outcome in Sierra Leone is much stronger, much better than that of Liberia. Even the approach to STEM, the educational institutions, are much stronger. In Liberia, we celebrate free education. But let's face it, the World Bank also did a report several years back. Every country around the world where free education is proffered, the quality of education is extremely poor and dismal. And so, too often, free education is looked at from the standpoint of payment for teachers. But what's about infrastructure spend? Let's look at the numbers. The total number of new students that will be enrolled in school as a result of our growth rate and increase in population between now and 2030 is 483,000 students, according to UNESCO. Do we have the classrooms for them? Do we have the teachers for them? How much have we invested in the Teacher Training Institute? The last budget, we invested in the Zozo Teacher Training Institute of 500 and something thousand. That's basically probably for wages. Are we really serious about education? Or are we pretending? Or we don't care about education because the government in power is not interested in education because they themselves don't come from that background. And I think in every respect, the people of Liberia needs to review these issues and give us an opportunity to lead our country towards better outcomes moving forward. Let's look at the allotment to the Ministry of Education. The Ministry of Education has an allotment of $43.6 million. Out of that money, $40 million is spent on teacher salary, meaning only about $3.6 million left. Imagine you have to buy chalk, you have to buy a duster, you have to buy paper, computers. The Ministry of Education itself has to function. So you understand why our government schools are totally non-functional. And what's up with STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and math? We know way around it. Not just that, but it's moved from STEM now to STEAM, where they're talking science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Clearly, this government is more interested in reaching the people in government than creating better outcome for the people that elected them into power. 6 years have already been lost. We cannot permit George Weah and his cohorts to have another 6 years. That would be a monumental mistake. We'll deal with some of the issues. Today, the other day, we're on Peace Island, meeting with probably about 500 women or more. One of the ladies spoke and said, today, we have to prostitute ourselves before we survive. Whether you want to face that reality or not, it appears to me is true from the resounding support she seemed to have had from her colleagues. The other day as well, I spoke to one lady who was pregnant who has a child for a pimping guy. I know the both of them. When I went to intervene, I was shocked what I found out. I found out this same guy had gotten 2 other girls pregnant. And so this one pimping guy, as a result of his income or appearance of it, I got 3-4 different women that he has under his, they don't live with him, but they are his lovers, and he's gotten them pregnant. Imagine 3 women have children for one man that is a pimping rider who himself is underemployed. Are these not critical problems for our country moving forward? Nowhere in the president's speech that was even identified. Let's just even deal with the issue of interest rate. Interest rate is a serious thing. Today, one of the biggest challenges, when you borrow money from the bank, US dollar is 12%. Liberian dollar is a different rate. But when you deposit money with the bank, it's 2% they give you. So the gap between deposit and borrowing is about 10%. So that is going to cause people not to want to tie up their money in banks because you're only getting 2%. The government has never seen this as important to even mention it in a speech or address it. If as a president you come to the table and speak and the bread and butter issues that are bothering people, you don't even deal with it, then who are you president for? You're president for yourself. That's why come 2023 this year, October, we are determined to see the back of George Weah. I'm also concerned, Mr. President. When I review your speech, a lot of the roads to be built result from borrowed money. So that means we are growing. When you came to power, we have borrowed about probably 15-16% of GDP. Today, it's racing to 28-point-something% of GDP. These additional borrowing will take us to about 30-something% of GDP. That is scary. The reason why it's scary, our rate of debt servicing right now is massive. We're spending about 11% of our national budget just to service debt. 11%. More than what we spend on education. That's very scary. And if care is not taken with all of these massive borrowings, that is not bringing anything in return in terms of growth to the economy, you will leave this country a country crippled by massive debt. The president's entire speech did not talk about how many jobs he created in 6 years. That was also scary. There are lots of people. There are lots of people coming to Monrovia today as a result of technology. Look, everybody has a phone. You don't have to own a Samsung. You can own an Atta. You can own a Techno. There are even lower and cheaper grades of phone. All you need to do, stay right to Era Supermarket, call your brother in Zorgo or wherever he has internet. He will see you. Most times people do these things. They stand to the nice places. What do you think happened with your brother? Your brother is on the car the next day. He doesn't need visa. He comes to Monrovia. So we have that massive rate of urbanization. Everybody coming to the city. What are we doing as a government, or what have we done as a government in the last 6 years to create employment in rural Liberia? Absolutely nothing. Everything is focused on the few in Monrovia. Monrovia is not Liberia. But yeah, it's easier to pay thousands of people, ask them to come up. You are deceiving them. They are also deceiving you. You brought free t-shirts. They were wearing. But I thought, you being who you are, not intellectually capable, I thought, like you said, the people of Liberia should judge you not on the basis of your eloquence, but on the basis of your output. I thought, speaking to the people after 6 years, you would say, we need to create 60,000 jobs every year. These are the various sectors in which we created jobs. Today, you will be leaving us with the same burdens you met us with. As of the time of your assumption of power, we're spending about 260 million on rice import. Today, we're spending 300 million on rice import. How much have you spent on agriculture as a contribution of the budget towards developing alternative value addition infrastructure to reduce our dependency on imported commodity? Nothing. You've made more trips than anything else. But you don't even report on these trips. How much do you spend on these trips? We don't know. How much have you brought in from these trips? We don't know. When other serious countries, when their presidents are taking trips, what do? They take with them, even as big as America is, 60-80% of the delegation, business people. The Liberian president take trip, it's, you know, the ministers and their concubines and wives or whoever else. How does such a trip help the poor people that believe in you, Mr. President? Do you really think you ought to run? I encourage you to think again, but while you're thinking, make sure you have a press conference to correct these economic figures. I want to thank you, my fellow Liberians and people in Radio Land. And I want to urge you, this election is not about money. It's not about t-shirt. It's about six more years of your life. If you do not vote wisely, we will be losing another 6 years of our lives to a leadership that does not deserve our attention. Thank you so much.
Okay.